What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, and today I want to talk about the slot cornerback position for the New York Giants because, listen, I think this is more of a competition than people are willing to admit. I like Cordell Flott. I like some of the guys that the Giants have in their cornerback room, but ultimately, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. Cordell Flott, maybe he takes a big step forward in 2024. Maybe he becomes the Giants' starting nickel cornerback. But what about Darnay Holmes? The Giants just re signed him. And what about anybody that they might draft in the 2024 NFL draft? Mike Sainristil, I like him a lot. We mentioned him in yesterday's episode, and I want to talk about him a little bit more because I feel like he's a really good fit for the New York Giants and what they're trying to do on defense this year under their new defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen. So, in this episode, I'm going to kind of dive into that, discuss who's going to be the slot cornerback for the New York Giants, kind of talk about who they have on their roster, who they don't have on their roster that maybe they could add to the lineup, and everything else in between. But before I dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the Giants slot cornerback position. So first and foremost, Cordell Flott. I want to talk about him because he's projected to be the Giants starter at the nickel cornerback position. And there are things that I really like about Cordell Flott, but there are question marks that I have with him. And obviously the question mark is his size, right? He's a very lanky, skinny cornerback. In my opinion, there are certain traits that he has that would translate better to outside cornerback, but he's played in the slot so far. And yes, he's played well in the slot so far. He's nabbed a few interceptions. I know we all remember in that playoff game versus the Minnesota Vikings on 4th down, he had a crucial pass breakup that ultimately won the Giants the game, if you look at it that way. So there's a lot to like with Cordell Flott, and I like his length, I like his speed. But at the end of the day, he's a 6'1", 175 pounds cornerback who in LSU at LSU during his collegiate career played a lot on the outside. So should we be expecting him to be the long-term starter in the nickel cornerback spot? It's a little bit of a question mark. 3rd round pick in 2022. Again, a guy with a lot of potential, but his snap count has been pretty inconsistent. 45 snaps in 2023 on the wide, 432 in the slots. And again, a guy that I like and think has a lot of potential, but still needs more development. Does Cordell Flott prevent you from drafting or signing somebody who might be better at the nickel cornerback position? In my opinion, no. And I know a lot of Giants fans might disagree with me. A lot of guys might feel like, okay, listen, we have Cordell Flott. He's 6'1", he's 175 pounds, he has length. He can be the nickel cornerback. But for me personally, I think that there is a lot to be untapped in that nickel cornerback role. And when you look at these playoff teams, these teams that go deep into the postseason, a lot of them have really good third cornerbacks on their roster, nickel cornerbacks on their roster, because it's the modern NFL. Most teams, their base defense, it's not a 3-4, it's not a 4-3. It's a nickel. A lot of teams are playing with 5 defensive backs on the field more often than not. So how do you kind of prepare for that in the 2024 season if you're the New York Giants, right? We know new defensive coordinator Shane Bowen coming over from the Tennessee Titans. He's going to play more of a hybrid or a multiple front defense where you're going to see a lot of 3-4 and 4-3, but you're also going to see a lot of nickel formations and nickel personnel packages. So the Giants need extra defensive backs, which is why on this channel in the past, I advocated for re-signing Xavier McKinney. In this defense, having extra safeties and defensive backs on the field feels important. But the Giants instead go with Brian Burns, decide to upgrade their front 7 instead, add to their pass rush to hopefully make life easier for their cornerbacks and their safeties and everyone else in between. So when you're looking at Cordell Flott and all these other nickel cornerbacks and out wide cornerbacks, they should benefit from having Brian Burns on the defense and benefit from having a few other pass rushers in this lineup. But still, what does this secondary look like in 2024? Well, to me, it's kind of hard to determine. We have a month, literally 1 month. I think it's on April 25th, the NFL draft starts. 1 month until the NFL draft. what are the Giants going to prioritize? We know, obviously, we've discussed on this channel, we know that they're looking at wide receivers, they're looking at quarterbacks, but are they looking on the defensive side of the ball? It's been pretty quiet on that end. We haven't heard a lot of buzz about the cornerbacks or the linebackers or pass rushers that they might be looking at. So I want to talk about one guy, Mike Sainristil from Michigan, who, again, we discussed in a recent episode, that I think makes a lot of sense for the New York Giants if they decide to go defensive backfield with their second or third round pick. So Sainristil is a player who very well could go early in the second round, very well could be the Giants pick at 47. But because he has such a undecided position in the NFL is what I'll describe it right now. Maybe he could fall into the third rounds for the Giants at 70. I wouldn't be shocked if that happened. Sainristil is a player who started his collegiate career as a wide receiver, caught a couple touchdown passes, racked up a few hundred yards for the Michigan Wolverines at wide receiver, but ultimately ended up making the transition to nickel cornerback and started 25 games defensively for the Wolverines at nickel cornerback and looked like a pretty damn good competitor. I mean, this is a guy with length, with speed, and with some really good IQ, but there are some drawbacks to his game. How physical is he? Well, he's pretty skinny. He's only 182 pounds, 5'10". So there are question marks about his ability to make an impact in the running game. And as a nickel cornerback, since you're taking a linebacker off the field and throwing another defensive back on the field, you want your nickel to be pretty good in run defense. But ultimately, Mike Sainristil, not the best in run defense, not the best tackler. But one of the things that I really love about him is his wide receiver background. So the Giants have Dane Belton on the roster, for example. The Giants will let Xavier McKinney go, but they still have Dane Belton, who has gotten his hand on the football a whole lot over the past few years. A couple interceptions, a couple fumble recoveries. It just feels like no matter where he is, he's got an opportunity to force a turnover one way or another, which is one of the things that I really love about Dane Belton, and which is a reason why I think he will be a starter in the Giants defense in 2024. And it's also why I think of Mike Sainristil makes a lot of sense for this Giants defense. His wide receiver background, his ability to track the ball while it's in the air, while in coverage, and make an interception. He had 6 interceptions in 2023, 2 pick sixes. Says a lot about the guy, in my opinion. And I think that ultimately, Mike Sainristil, if he's there in the second round for the Giants, would be a great nickel cornerback who has safety flexibility and also has a lot of experience on special teams, which I think the Giants are going to value. We know how Brian Dable and Joe Shane feel about guys who play in more than one spot on the team, not necessarily more than one spot on the defense, right? If you think back to like when Julian Love was on this team, he played slot, he played out wide, he played safety, of course, he played all these different positions. Mike Sainristil is similar but different in the way where, yeah, he could probably play on the outside if you force him to. He's more comfortable in the nickel quarterback role, and he can definitely play safety. But what I like about him is he makes an impact on special teams, a lot of special teams experience. So that will force him onto the field sooner rather than later for the New York Giants if they were to draft Mike Sainristil early in the 2024 NFL draft. So Michigan product, again, we kind of talked about it in yesterday's episode. Alex and I said, hey, if you're going after defensive players in this year's draft, why not target a Michigan prospect? Because that defense was so damn good in 2023. If you're drafting a defensive player out of Michigan, more likely than not, you're getting a pretty good football player. And Mike Sainristil, whether you want to go with the PFF scouting guide or the Draft Network scouting guide, NFL.com Lance Zierlein, everybody's saying at the end of the day, maybe we don't know what position he's going to play at the next level, but we all know he's going to be a good football player at the next level, has the ability to make plays and just put himself in the right position at the right time. So I really like Mike Sainristil as a second round target, maybe third round target for the New York Giants in this draft class. I think that when you're looking at their slot cornerback position, again, yes, Cordell Flott is a player I'm excited about and I think could be really good. but it doesn't hurt to add competition to that spot, in my opinion. It doesn't hurt to add extra talent and depth to this defensive backfield. And Mike Sainristil not only could compete for that starting nickel cornerback job with Cordell Flott, but at the end of the day could just be a really solid player who kind of fits multiple roles and wears numerous hats for the Giants defense, whether you're talking in the nickel, out wide, or safety. There are many reasons why I like Mike Sainristil. And again, because he has that wide receiver background, if you guys saw yesterday at his pro day for Michigan, he took snaps at wide receiver. So it looks like Sainristil is kind of having either a fallback plan where maybe if he doesn't work out at cornerback, he takes over at wide receiver in the NFL, or maybe he wants to be a two-way player, which is pretty cool and exciting. I mean, this is a guy who could potentially play on your defense and contribute for your offense, which is rare for sure. Not many players in the NFL who can play both ways. The Giants had what was the name of that fullback? Somebody remind me in the comment section the name of that fullback that the Giants had who played defensive tackle and fullback. He was an exciting player, but with Mike Sainristil, he kind of reminds me of that moment where the Giants had a guy who played on both sides of the ball, could play defense and play offense. And Sainristil ran some decent routes at his pro day, made some good catches, and showed a lot on tape during his time at Michigan that tells you, hey, maybe he is a good wide receiver. And then during his time at Michigan, proved to everybody, like, hey, I'm a really good nickel cornerback. So for the New York Giants, who are deciding to run with this new Shane Bowen defense, play more nickel and dime packages, I think Sainristil should be a priority target for them on day two because they want to get extra defensive secondary pieces on the field in 2024. So with Sainristil, I really like what he brings to the table. Physical cornerback with a lot of speed and a lot of ability to just kind of play all over your defense and special teams. Really like what he brings to the table. But going back into the Giants slot cornerback position, who's playing that role? Is it Cordell Flott? Of course, I'll bring him up in this conversation as a potential competitor if the Giants draft him. But just looking at who's on the roster, the Giants have Cordell Flott. Aaron Robinson is technically still on the roster, but what have we seen out of Aaron Robinson? That's a player that Dave Gettleman traded up for in the third round of, I want to say, the 2021 NFL draft. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he hasn't done anything for the New York Giants because he's just been injured. He hasn't stayed on the field. He hasn't even gotten on the field over the past two seasons. So Aaron Robinson is a player who I've lost faith in personally. And I don't know how you guys feel. Again, let me know down below. But he's a player that I don't think can pan out or succeed at the next level because he's so injury prone. Whether it's a lower body injury or an abdominal injury, he's had a few already in his NFL career. And as a result, the Giants haven't been able to put him on the lineup. So with Aaron Robinson, I think you can almost factor him out of the equation. I don't think he makes the team this year. I think that he does get cut during the offseason. And then for the Giants, it's down to Cordell Flott and Darnay Holmes. Unless you're projecting a massive step forward for Cordell Flott or Darnay Holmes, which I don't think you're projecting either for either of those players, I think you have to look in a new direction for the Giants and say, hey, we like the potential of Cordell. We like the baseline talent of Darnay, but what about improving that position? What is the potential? I don't think those guys are necessarily going to improve and become better players in 2024. So the Giants probably should look in a new direction for added talent to the slot cornerback position, in my opinion. And again, some of you might disagree and believe in Cordell Flott as the nickel cornerback. And I think he will be the nickel. I think he will be the starter in week one. But I do think the Giants should attempt to add talent to their secondary. We've talked about the CB2 position, how Adoree Jackson is likely leaving. Maybe they sign Tre'Davious White. Maybe they sign somebody else. Christian Fulton got signed elsewhere, so you can knock him off the list. The Giants won't be pursuing him. I don't know what the Giants are going to do in their secondary, but I do know it's thin and they need to add talent. So whether it be through free agency or it be through the draft, the Giants need to add somebody to the secondary, in my opinion. And that's why I wanted to discuss Mike Sainristil. I think that he makes a lot of sense for the Giants in the second or third round as a player who fits multiple roles on defense and special teams. Makes a lot of sense. And again, I like Cordell Flott, and I think that Cordell Flott could definitely take a step forward in 2024 and be the Giants' primary nickel cornerback. And honestly, for what it's worth, I think Flott could play a little bit on the outside. I wish the Giants would give him more of an opportunity to do so, but they haven't so far. So it seems like they're going to go ahead and make him their slot corner. I think he could be pretty good in that role. But for me personally, Cordell, Darnay, they don't prevent me from going into the draft and trying to upgrade that position. So that's why I think Mike Sainristil could be an intriguing target for the Giants. And if not, then it's going to be a training camp competition in my eyes between Cordell Flott and Darnay Holmes. And may the best man win. It's going to be really interesting to see who takes over at that nickel cornerback role. But again, I really do think that the Giants should add some extra talent to their secondary in the slot and even at CB2, as we've talked about many times, because I like Trey Hawkins and what he brings, and he looked great playing in training camp last year, but on the field during the regular season, plenty of question marks. So I don't know what the Giants are going to do in their secondary. It's going to be interesting, but they have some holes to fill, and they have a few opportunities to add talent. We'll see ultimately what they do. And of course, we will update you on what the Giants decide to do in their secondary right here on Fireside Giants. But ultimately, let me know your thoughts down below, what you think the Giants should do in their secondary. And make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
TVSO.